Henry Ford. The name. It's everywhere, right? The car, the assembly line. We all think we know the story. But today, we're going to peel back the layers of the legend and really look at the man's core philosophies. And you might be surprised at how relevant his century-old ideas still are.
So who was he really? Was he this ruthless, hard-nosed tycoon that history sometimes makes him out to be? Or was he something else, a generous visionary with a blueprint for prosperity that we've kind of forgotten? To get to the bottom of this, we're not just going to read books. We're going to hear from someone who was actually there.
And here he is. This is Phil Morgan. At 88 years old, get this, he's one of the last people alive who personally knew Henry Ford. And his story, well, it gives us a window into Ford's world that you just don't get from the history books.
Phil's start in life was, well, it was rough, to put it mildly. He was an orphan, a ward of the state, just bouncing from one foster home to another. He said it himself, he didn't really have much of a future. But then, in 1944, everything changed. He got chosen for this really special program, Henry Ford's School for Boys.
Now, this is a really important point. This was not a government program or some big state-run thing. As Paul Akers, who interviewed Phil, points out, this was a private individual. It was a businessman, Henry Ford, who saw a problem, these kids with no prospects, and decided to do something about it himself.
And Ford's school? Wow. It was something else. It wasn't just about hitting the books. It was about building a whole person. They do academics in the morning, sure, but in the afternoon, it was all about hands-on, physical labor. And on top of that, they learned life skills, things like health, neatness, even etiquette and dancing. The whole thing was designed to build character, discipline, and a real work ethic.
And you know what stuck with Phil Morgan all these years? It's this simple but powerful idea he learned there. In order to be a good leader, you first had to know how to be a good follower. You have to have that self-discipline, he said, before you can ever hope to lead others properly. So this school, this generosity, it wasn't just some side hobby for Ford. It was actually part of his core philosophy, the same thinking that drove his business. And he laid it all out in his 1926 book, Today and Tomorrow. So let's dive into that and unpack some of the huge ideas in there. Okay, first up, we've got this concept he called the wage motive. And let me tell you, this was a total game changer. It completely flipped the script on how people thought about business, their workers, and their customers.
Think about it. Back then, the standard playbook was pretty simple, right? Pay your workers as little as you can get away with and charge as much as you can for your product. That's how you make a profit. But Ford, he threw that whole idea out the window. He did the exact opposite. His wage motive was all about paying high wages while selling at low prices. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, even today.
And this wasn't just talk. In 1914, he absolutely floored the industrial world by raising his minimum wage to $5 a day. Now, you have to understand, that was more than double what most factory workers were making at the time. This wasn't just a pay bump. It was an industrial revolution.
So, what was he thinking? Why do that? Well, this quote says it all. Ford had this incredibly simple yet brilliant insight. The public isn't some abstract entity. It's made up of your own workers and people just like them. By paying his employees enough money to actually buy the cars they were building, he was literally creating his own customers. It's a perfect feedback loop.
Okay, so that's the wage motive. Now let's look at his next big idea, because it's all connected. Ford drew this really sharp line between what he called a true business, one that serves the public, and a company that's just controlled by what he called money power, only there to make financiers rich. He even had these great names for it. Live money versus dead money. Live money, that's the profit you pour right back into the business. You use it to make the product better, to lower costs, to grow. It's money that's working for the business. Dead money, on the other hand, was debt. He argued it doesn't take any real risk. It just sits there, demanding to be paid back, forcing the business to serve the bankers instead of the customers. He saw it as this dead weight, just strangling the business. And all of this leads to maybe his most radical idea of all, his entire philosophy on what profit is actually for. And spoiler alert, it was not about lining his own pockets. For Henry Ford, profit had a job to do. It was a tool for public service. He believed that money should go right back into the machine, to fund new ideas, to make things cheaper for everyone, to improve wages for the workers, and ultimately, to protect the company's ability to keep serving society. See? It's this virtuous cycle where everyone benefits. So, the big question is, did any of this actually work? Well, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. The first Model T rolled out in 1908. It took 7 years to make the first million.
Okay, impressive. But then it took only 6 more years to hit 5 million. And then just 3 years after that, they hit the 10 millionth car. The growth wasn't just steady, it was accelerating at a mind-boggling pace.
I mean, just look at this. On one side, you've got his first little creation, the quadricycle from 1896. And on the other, the 10 millionth car, just 28 years later. It's just a stunning picture of how a powerful set of ideas can literally remake the world.
Let's just let these numbers from his book sink in for a second. By 1926, his company directly employed over 200,000 people. That's the size of a city. But then you add in all the suppliers and dealers and service stations, and his one idea was supporting the livelihoods of an estimated 3 million people. And he had put the power of 300 million horses on the road, which it fundamentally changed human mobility forever.
You know, for all this talk about industry and machines, he also had a really modern take on failure. He didn't see it as the end of the road. For Ford, failure was just an opportunity. It was a chance to learn, to gather information, and to start over. But this time, a little bit smarter.
So that brings us to the big question. These ideas, high wages, low prices, reinvesting profits, and seeing business as a form of public service, they're 100 years old. In our complex world of global finance, quarterly earnings reports, and gig economies, are they just hopelessly outdated relics? Or are they perhaps more relevant than ever?